Okay, let's continue to unpack this story now. I'm joined by legal expert Zola Majavu. Mr. Majavu, good afternoon. Welcome to today. Thank you very much for your time here this afternoon. Overall, what should we make of this decision to strike off Advocate Malesela Teffo from the role?
Good afternoon, Braden, and good afternoon to the viewers out there. Look, firstly, it's been a long time coming, even though personally I'm sad. It's never a good thing to see one of your own bite the dust, so to speak. But on the whole, one cannot fault the judgment because it is not based on one incident or one complaint. There has been a multiplicity of complaints and all pointing in the direction of conduct that is unbecoming of an officer of the court, a legal practitioner, and a colleague. And I have said, repeatedly that some of the antics that he embarked upon were skating on thin ice. So it comes as no surprise that the full bench took the decision that it did. And I think correctly so, even though one feels for his family.
Just listening to the judgment and what was being said, I mean, more than 75% of the complaints against him related to his conduct.
That's exactly the unfortunate part, because it is one thing to make a mistake. None of us are perfect. We make mistakes. I make my fair share of mistakes. But it cannot be that those mistakes become synonymous with your character, to a point where you simply do not appreciate the basics of decorum, collegiality, and showing respect to the court, showing respect to those with whom you come into contact. So it is really unfortunate, because one of the key pillars that underpin our practice as law is our ability to be respectful, even in the face of adversity, in the face of unpopular decisions that may not go necessarily your way or the client's way. But at the end of it all, we have to apply our trade in a respectful manner, not only amongst ourselves, but also amongst society at large. Because remember, your license to practice is basically a license that unleashes you to unsuspecting members of the public. And if those people who you are supposed to serve are on the receiving end of your poor conduct, then you ought not to be practicing as an attorney or as an advocate, or you should not even be carrying the title of a legal practitioner, because you are simply not fit and proper.
Yeah, some of the complaints, I mean, are very serious, like misleading the court, that would speak to the law, and threatening clients, and then, of course, the conduct. So the fact that he was in absentia and the court ruled in favor of the Legal Practice Council, did it make matters worse for him that he was not there, or could it had no impact at all, judging or considering the kind of complaints he was facing?
No, it really made no difference, because ordinarily these types of cases are heard and argued on the papers. So it is not unheard of for parties involved in those matters not to be present at court. But I would have imagined that where your life is at stake, where your professional license is at stake, you would want to be present so that you can hear for yourself what the judges have to say about you and how your fate may or may not be sealed. But there is nothing wrong necessarily in not being present.
Okay. Is his fate sealed? Does he have any other recourse? Can he appeal this? I mean, what can he do? I understand one of the things he needs to do now is to hand over his certificates of qualification.
Of course, it is always open to any aggrieved party to appeal to a higher court. In this instance, he would have to first bring an application for leave to appeal, meaning permission to appeal. He doesn't enjoy an automatic right of appeal, and he has to go before the same judges, who, if so persuaded that there is a likelihood that another court may come to a different conclusion other than the ones that they had arrived at, the prospects and the merits of success are good, and it is in the interest of justice to do so, they may well grant him leave to appeal, and in which case the SCA may see things differently, and who knows, maybe they may reduce a disbarment to a suspension of a limited period of time, or it could even be downright to a fine. but I don't see how that can be possible in these circumstances. Notionally, yes, he does have the right to bring an application for leave to appeal, and if he does so, his disbarment is put in abeyance until the finalization of the appeal, unless the LPC brings a further application to say, pending his appeal and notwithstanding the appeal, the order of the lower court, which is the High Court in this instance, must be given effect. And if he succeeds, if the LPC succeeds, then he simply has to await the outcome of an SCA ruling, which may or may not reverse the situation. But he does have that notional right of appeal. But on the merits and on the record, as one has followed it, I'm one of those who may say that there are simply no prospects and there's no likelihood that another court may come to a different finding. But I don't want to appear insensitive to his rights. It is a right that is open to him.
Yes, and that's a fair point and a good point to make. I don't know Mr. Teffo at all, never met him, never interviewed him, unlike you, for example, when we talk to you for analysis here. But having watched recently, since the Senzo Meyiwa made a trial, how he has behaved and carried himself in court, including this week where he made that surprise appearance, asking to speak to the judge, Judge Maumela, after having withdrawn from the case dramatically a few weeks ago, leads me to think there's still another surprise here, that he might maybe do something else that maybe nobody else might have thought of. That likelihood, whatever it would be, I don't know if you think we should brace ourselves for more, that it is not the end of this case.
Look, I think we can accept that he may well want to take the matter on appeal, and if he is so inclined, there'll be nothing wrong with it. It is perfectly within his rights to do so. But I would imagine that he would have to tread very cautiously when he exercises his rights. But conduct that seems to be piling on top of another may also militate against him, because as officers of the court, we exercise restraint. Even if you're not happy, there are ways in which you express your displeasure or your dissatisfaction within the applicable prescripts, and showing a modicum of respect. And sometimes you may even garner sympathy in some quarters. But if you behave brazenly in a manner that says, I don't care, it may well harden attitudes of those who might have to seal your fate on the law and on the facts. At the end of the day, judges exercise a discretion, but you must assist yourself to be assisted. And here's another thing. It's not entirely permanently over for him. There are instances where lawyers who've been struck off the roll have on later dates approached the courts for the courts to consider readmitting them, but they have to demonstrate that they've been rehabilitated, they've mended the error of their ways, and in the event of non-opposition, you are still given a second chance. So it is important how you conduct yourself post being disbarred, because your conduct after that may well be an indication of whether you are simply incorrigible, or you've maybe taken two steps back and realized the error of your ways and showing remorse and seek to actively correct your otherwise errant behavior. So it is still notionally possible for him to bounce back later and demonstrate that he is now fit, he is worthy of trust, he is worthy of being unleashed to the unsuspecting public. At the end of the day, when that happens, and if it happens, it will be based on particular circumstances and what conduct he would have demonstrated to the court that warrants that he be reconsidered as person worthy of that particular license. But for now, it seems to be, sadly, very sadly, game over, and one would advise him to take two steps back and rather do a serious introspection and correct that lapse of diplomacy that had become so synonymous with his own behavior, and correct it. And it may well be that he may be given a second chance in life. At the end of the day, his own fate is in his own hands, in my respectful view. And my heart goes out to him, because a part of me tells me that my brother needs help. Okay. He really needs serious help.
Thank you very much for your honest views and insights there. That's Zola Majavu, legal expert, as we're just unpacking further the decision by the Pretoria High Court to struck off the roll advocate Malesela Teffo. So as of now, he will not be part of the legal practitioners.